A massive crack in the ground that's estimated to be up to 50 feet deep has opened up in Kenya seemingly overnight. The crack stretches along Kenya's Great Rift Valley, and many scientists believe it could end up splitting the continent apart.
Our planet might look like a solid, dependable marble from space, but under the surface, it's actually a hot mess of moving parts. Earth is literally bursting at the seams, stretching and snapping until the ground rips wide open. From sun-scorched canyons that can swallow mountain ranges to deep-sea gashes that look like scars from a sci-fi movie, these massive fissures prove that the ground beneath your feet is anything but permanent. Ready to see where the Earth is falling apart? Let's do it. 15. The Grand Canyon, USA. When you talk about massive gaps in the crust, you have to start with the heavyweight champion of Arizona. The Grand Canyon isn't just a crack. It's a colossal, multicolored abyss that makes everything else look like a pothole. Stretching up to 18 miles wide in certain spots, this isn't the result of a sudden earthquake, but rather a slow-motion heist carried out by the Colorado River over millions of years. Imagine a sculptor spending 6 million years chipping away at a rock. That is the level of dedication we are talking about here. Standing on the south rim, the scale is genuinely hard for the human brain to process. You aren't just looking across a distance. You are looking back through 2 billion years of geological history layered in red, orange, and gold rock. It's so wide that it creates its own weather patterns. If you're at the top, it might be a chilly morning with light snow, but by the time you hike down to the bottom, you're sweating in desert heat. It's a vertical transition of life zones that shouldn't exist in one place. While the width is the headline, the depth is what gives it soul. At a mile deep, the canyon exposes the great unconformity, a gap in the geological record where hundreds of millions of years of rock simply vanished. It's a mystery wrapped in a gorge. Whether you are rafting the rapids or peering over the edge at Mather Point, the Grand Canyon serves as a humbling reminder that water eventually wins every fight against solid stone. It is the Earth's most beautiful scar, proving that even a crack can become a masterpiece if you give it enough time and a little bit of gravity. 14. The Great Rift Valley, Africa. If the Grand Canyon is a masterpiece of erosion, the Great Rift Valley is a masterpiece of destruction. This isn't just a single crack, it is a massive series of contiguous geographic trenches that stretches approximately 4,000 miles from Jordan in Southwest Asia, all the way down to Mozambique in Southeast Africa. This is literally the birthplace of humanity, but it's also the place where the African continent is slowly deciding to break up with itself. The tectonic plates are pulling apart, and the ground is sinking to fill the void. The width of this rift is staggering, spanning 30 to 40 miles in many sections. It's so massive that it contains some of the deepest lakes in the world, like Lake Tanganyika, and some of the highest mountains, like Kilimanjaro. It's a land of extremes. In some areas, the rift is a lush paradise. In others, like the Danakil Depression, it's a volcanic wasteland that looks like another planet entirely. Scientists estimate that in a few million years, the rift will get so wide and deep that the Indian Ocean will come flooding in, effectively turning East Africa into a giant island. Living along the Great Rift is like living on a geological fault line that refuses to sleep. New cracks frequently open up in the middle of highways or farm fields in Kenya, appearing almost overnight after heavy rains or minor tremors. These fissures can be dozens of feet deep and miles long, serving as a terrifying preview of the continental split to come. It's a reminder that our maps are just temporary. The Earth is constantly redesigning its borders, and the Great Rift Valley is the most ambitious construction project currently underway on the planet's surface. Number 13. The Mariana Trench. We usually think of cracks as things we can walk up to and peer over, but the widest and most intimidating crack on Earth is one you'll never see without a multi-million-dollar submarine. Located in the western Pacific Ocean, the Mariana Trench is a crescent-shaped scar in the crust that defines the word extreme. At its widest point, the trench is about 43 miles across. If you took Mount Everest and flipped it upside down, It wouldn't even come close to touching the bottom of this watery abyss. This crack is formed by a process called subduction, where the massive Pacific Plate is being forced underneath the smaller Mariana Plate. It's a slow-motion car crash on a planetary scale. Because it's so deep, nearly 7 miles down, the pressure at the bottom is over 1,000 times the standard atmospheric pressure at sea level. That's like having an elephant stand on your thumb, but everywhere. Despite the crushing dark and the freezing temperatures, life still finds a way to exist down there in the form of ghost white fish and strange, translucent shrimp. The Mariana Trench represents the ultimate frontier of our planet. We actually have better maps of the surface of Mars than we do of the floor of this trench. It's a place of silence and mystery, where the Earth's crust is recycled back into the mantle. The sheer scale of the width, those 43 miles of dark open water, reminds us that the ocean isn't just a flat surface. It's a deep, complex world with canyons that dwarf anything we have on dry land. It is the definitive void of our world, a massive tectonic throat that swallows the sea floor. Think the ground is stable? These massive gaps are proof that the Earth is actually a giant jigsaw puzzle that doesn't quite fit together. 12. Baffin Island's Sam Ford Fjord, Canada. If you head far enough north into the Canadian Arctic, you'll stumble upon a landscape that feels like it belongs in an epic fantasy novel. Sam Ford Fjord on Baffin Island is one of the most dramatic gashes on the planet's surface. Unlike the dusty cracks of the desert, this is a world of granite and ice. The fjord is a massive, water-filled crack, carved out by ancient glaciers that acted like giant sandpaper, grinding away the earth until only vertical walls remained. These walls rise nearly 5,000 feet straight up from the icy water, creating a narrow, deep corridor. The width of the fjord varies, but the scale of the surrounding cliffs makes it feel much tighter than it is. It's a favorite spot for world-class base jumpers and rock climbers who are brave enough to tackle Walker Citadel, a massive rock tower that leans over the abyss. The water at the bottom is freezing and filled with icebergs, making the entire place feel like a giant cold fracture in the world's skull. It's a stark reminder of the power of the last ice age. What makes Sam Ford Fjord so special is its raw, untouched beauty. There are no gift shops or paved roads here. It's just miles of jagged rock and deep water. The geological crack here isn't just a hole in the ground. It's a pathway for the ocean to penetrate deep into the heart of a mountainous island. As the climate changes and the remaining glaciers melt, the landscape continues to shift, but the sheer granite faces remain as permanent scars of a time when ice ruled the earth. It's a silent, freezing monument to the power of erosion and time. 11. The Silfra Fissure, Iceland. Most cracks in the earth are things you want to stay far away from, but the Silfra Fissure in Iceland is one people actually pay to jump into. Located in Thingvellir National Park, this is one of the only places on the planet where you can see the gap between two tectonic plates, the North American and the Eurasian, right through the crystal-clear water. While it isn't miles wide like the Grand Canyon, it is a literal crack in the most traditional sense, and it is growing wider by about 2 centimeters every single year. The water inside Silfra is some of the clearest on Earth. It's glacial meltwater that has been filtered through underground volcanic rock for decades, making it so pure you can actually drink it while you swim. When you dive down into the fissure, you can literally reach out and touch North America with your left hand and Europe with your right. It's a surreal experience that makes the abstract concept of plate tectonics feel very real and very physical. The big crack here is a vibrant blue corridor of jagged basalt rock. Even though it looks peaceful, Silfra is a reminder of the violent volcanic activity that built Iceland. The island is essentially a giant scab formed where the Earth's crust is pulling apart. As the plates drift, the ground frequently snaps, creating new fissures and shifting the walls of the old ones. It's a living, breathing geological event. For divers, it's a bucket list adventure. But for the planet, it's just another sign that the Atlantic Ocean is slowly getting wider. It's the only place where falling into a crack in the Earth feels like floating through outer space. 10. The San Andreas Fault, USA. The San Andreas Fault is probably the most famous crack in the world, mostly because it has a nasty habit of threatening to knock down Los Angeles and San Francisco. Stretching 800 miles through California, this fault marks the boundary where the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate are sliding past each other. It's not a clean break, it's a jagged, messy line of crushed rock that is visible from space. In some areas, like the Carrizo Plain, the fault looks like a giant, deep furrow plowed into the earth. What makes the San Andreas so fascinating is how it moves. It's a strike-slip fault, meaning the two sides are grinding sideways. This movement isn't smooth. The plates get stuck, pressure builds up for decades, and then snap. The energy is released in a massive earthquake. You can actually see the width of this geological zone in the offset of riverbeds and fences that have been torn apart over the years. One side of a creek might be 20 feet further north than the other side, all because of the fault's movement. While movies depict the San Andreas as a giant hole that swallows cars, the reality is a bit more subtle but equally powerful. It's a wide zone of fractured earth that has shaped the entire landscape of California, creating valleys and pushing up mountains. Scientists monitor it with thousands of sensors, waiting for the big one. It's a reminder that even when the Earth looks solid, there is a massive amount of tension just beneath the surface. The San Andreas isn't just a crack. It's a loaded spring waiting to be released. 9. The Enriquillo-Plantain Fault, Haiti. The Enriquillo-Plantain Fault is a stark example of how a crack in the Earth can change human history in a matter of seconds. This fault line runs through the northern Caribbean, cutting right across the southern peninsula of Haiti. Like the San Andreas, it's a transform fault where two plates are sliding past each other. However, because it passes through such a densely populated and vulnerable area, the cracks it produces are often associated with some of the most devastating natural disasters of the modern era. In 2010, this fault system let out a massive burst of energy that resulted in a catastrophic earthquake. While the main fault itself is deep underground, the surface features of the rift are visible in the way the mountains and valleys are aligned. The width of the fault zone isn't just a single line, it's a complex network of fractures that have shaped the topography of Hispaniola over millions of years. This crack is essentially a pressure cooker, absorbing the movement of the Caribbean plate as it gets squeezed by the North American plate. Geologically, the fault is part of a larger system that connects all the way to Jamaica. It creates a series of pull-apart basins that often fill with water or sediment, creating the very land that people build their lives on. It's a tragic irony of geology. The same tectonic forces that create beautiful harbors and fertile valleys are also the ones that can destroy them in an instant. This crack is a sobering reminder that we are just guests on a planet that is constantly shifting and settling, often with very little warning for those living above. 08. The Baikal Rift Zone, Russia. Hidden away in the middle of Siberia is the Baikal Rift Zone, a massive tear in the earth that is home to the world's oldest, deepest, and most voluminous freshwater lake. Lake Baikal sits right in the center of this rift, and it is absolutely enormous. The rift itself is where the Eurasian plate is literally being pulled apart. Because the crust is so thin here, the ground has dropped down to create a basin that is over a mile deep in some places, filled with water that holds 20% of the world's unfrozen surface fresh water. The rift is about 1,000 miles long and varies in width, but the sheer volume of the crack is what blows people's minds. It's so deep that if you emptied the lake, you'd be looking at one of the most spectacular canyons on Earth. Because the rift is still active, the lake is actually getting wider by about 2 centimeters a year, the same rate at which your fingernails grow. Eventually, millions of years from now, this crack could grow so large that it splits the Asian continent in two, forming a brand new ocean. The Baikal Rift is also a hotspot for unique biology. Because it has been isolated for so long, the crack has become a laboratory for evolution, home to the world's only freshwater seals and thousands of species found nowhere else. It's a beautiful, frozen wilderness that hides a violent geological process. The Earth is literally ripping open beneath the ice of Siberia, and Lake Baikal is the stunning, deep blue scar left behind. It's a place where the power of water meets the raw, splitting force of the planet's internal heat. Think those were big? Hold on to your hat, because we're about to dive into the cracks that are so deep. The sun never reaches the bottom. 07. The East Pacific Rise. Moving from the frozen depths of Siberia to the bottom of the ocean, we find the East Pacific Rise. This isn't just a crack. It is a giant, underwater volcanic mountain range that marks a mid-ocean ridge. It runs along the floor of the Pacific Ocean, acting as a divergent boundary, where the Earth's crust is literally being manufactured. As the plates pull apart, magma rises from the mantle to fill the gap, cooling instantly in the freezing seawater to create new seafloor. It is one of the most productive volcanic systems on our entire planet. The width of this rift system is immense, though it's hard to define because the ridge is constantly expanding. The plates here are moving apart at a rate of about 7.5 to 15 centimeters per year, which is basically the speed demon of the tectonic world. Because it spreads so fast, it doesn't have a deep, jagged central rift valley like the mid-Atlantic ridge. Instead, it looks more like a broad, arched upland. It's a massive, smooth-sided swell in the Earth's crust that is constantly leaking heat and minerals into the dark ocean water above it. This underwater crack is also famous for hosting black smokers, hydrothermal vents that look like chimneys belching out thick, black smoke. These vents are actually superheated water filled with minerals, and they support entire ecosystems of giant tube worms and blind crabs that have never seen the sun. The East Pacific Rise is a reminder that the Earth is a recycling machine. It's constantly splitting open at the bottom of the sea, pushing continents away from each other and creating new land in a process that has been going on for billions of years. 06. The Gakkel Ridge, Arctic Ocean. If you thought the East Pacific Rise was remote, the Gakkel Ridge takes it to a whole new level. Tucked away under the permanent ice cap of the Arctic Ocean, this is the slowest spreading ridge on Earth. While other cracks are racing to expand, the Gakkel Ridge is taking its sweet time, moving at a glacial pace of less than 1 centimeter per year. It is a massive rift that separates the North American plate from the Eurasian plate in the far north, and for a long time, scientists thought it was geologically dead. However, they were wrong. In the early 2000s, researchers discovered that this deep-sea crack is actually home to active volcanoes and hydrothermal vents. Because it spreads so slowly, the crack at the center of the ridge is incredibly deep and wide, exposing layers of the Earth's mantle that are usually buried miles beneath the crust. It's like a deep, open wound in the planet that won't heal. The rugged topography of the Gakkel Ridge is unlike anything else on the seafloor, featuring jagged peaks and massive valleys that have been perfectly preserved by the slow movement. Studying this crack is nearly impossible because of the thick Arctic ice, requiring specialized ice-breaking ships and autonomous underwater vehicles. It remains one of the least explored places on the planet. The Gakkel Ridge proves that even in the coldest, most quiet corners of the world, the Earth is still pulling itself apart. It's a silent, slow-motion explosion happening at the top of the world, hidden under miles of ice and water, slowly rewriting the geography of the Arctic Circle one tiny millimeter at a time. 05. The Copper Canyon, Mexico. Back on dry land, we have Mexico's answer to the Grand Canyon, the Barranca del Cobre, or Copper Canyon. This is actually a group of 6 distinct canyons in the Sierra Madre Occidental that, when combined, are significantly larger and deeper than the Grand Canyon in the United States. The system was formed by 6 rivers that carved deep, wide gashes into the volcanic rock over millions of years. The name comes from the copper-green hue of the canyon walls, which are draped in thick vegetation and ancient history. The width of these canyons is breathtaking. At some points, you can look across a gap that feels like it's swallowed the entire horizon. The walls drop down over 6,000 feet, creating a vertical world where the top is a cool pine forest and the bottom is a humid tropical jungle. This crack isn't just a geological feature, it's a home. The indigenous Raramuri people have lived in these canyons for centuries, famous for their incredible long-distance running abilities, often traversing the steep, rugged trails of the canyon floor with ease. What makes Copper Canyon unique is the famous Chepe Railway that runs along its edge. The train crosses 37 bridges and goes through 86 tunnels, offering a front-row seat to the massive scale of the Earth's fractures. You can see where the ground has been torn open by the raw power of water and tectonic uplift, revealing a maze of green-clad cliffs and hidden waterfalls. It is a vibrant, living crack in the Earth that reminds us that geological forces don't just create barren voids, they create diverse ecosystems and beautiful, hidden worlds for people to inhabit. 04. The Rhine Rift Valley, Germany/France. The Rhine Rift Valley is a classic example of a graben, which is a fancy geological term for a block of the Earth's crust that has dropped down between two parallel faults. Located between the Black Forest in Germany and the Vosges Mountains in France, this massive valley is about 200 miles long and up to 25 miles wide. It's a giant, flat-bottomed crack that has become one of the most important agricultural and industrial regions in Europe. Basically, it's a tectonic disaster that turned into a real estate gold mine. This rift started forming about 35 million years ago when the Earth's crust began to stretch and thin in response to the Alps being pushed up to the south. As the ground pulled apart, the center dropped, and the Rhine River eventually moved in to fill the space. Today, the valley floor is covered in thick, fertile sediment, making it perfect for growing grapes and making world-class wine. However, don't let the peaceful vineyards fool you. The rift is still active. The area experiences frequent minor earthquakes, a sign that the crust is still settling. The Rhine Rift Valley is a perfect illustration of how a crack can define a continent's history. It has served as a natural highway for trade, a border between empires, and a source of geothermal energy. Unlike the jagged scars of the desert, this rift is disguised by cities, forests, and farms. It shows that sometimes the biggest cracks in the earth aren't scary abysses, but wide, welcoming valleys that provide the perfect foundation for human civilization, even if the ground beneath them is technically still falling apart. From the bottom of the sea to the vineyards of Europe, these cracks prove that the Earth is always moving, so maybe don't get too attached to your current GPS coordinates. 03. The West Antarctic Rift System. When we think of Antarctica, we usually picture a solid, unmoving block of ice, but underneath that frozen sheet lies one of the largest and most mysterious cracks on the planet. The West Antarctic Rift System is a massive valley where the continent is literally trying to tear itself into two pieces. It's roughly the size of the Great Rift Valley in Africa, but because it's buried under miles of ice, we can't see it with our own eyes. Scientists have to use ice-penetrating radar and satellite gravity maps to see the jagged landscape hidden below. The width of this rift is enormous, spanning hundreds of miles in some areas. What makes it particularly spicy is the presence of active volcanoes hidden under the ice. As the crust thins and pulls apart, heat from the Earth's mantle rises up, melting the bottom of the glaciers. This creates a slippery lubricant that causes the ice to slide into the ocean faster. If the West Antarctic Rift were to fully open up, it could destabilize the entire West Antarctic ice sheet, which would be a huge deal for global sea levels. This hidden crack is a reminder that even the most desolate, frozen places on Earth are geologically alive. The rift has been active for tens of millions of years, and it continues to shape the future of the continent. It's a silent, subglacial monster that is slowly stretching the southern end of our world. While we might never stand at the bottom of its valleys, the West Antarctic Rift is a powerful player in the Earth's climate system, proving that what happens deep inside a crack can affect every coastline on the planet. Number 2. The Rio Grande Rift, USA. Stretching from central Colorado all the way down into Mexico, the Rio Grande Rift is a massive north-south crack that is literally pulling the American Southwest apart. This isn't just a canyon carved by a river. It's a tectonic rift where the Earth's crust is stretching and thinning like a piece of taffy. As the crust pulls apart, the center drops down to form a wide valley, while the edges stay high, creating dramatic mountain ranges like the Sangre de Cristo and the Sandia Mountains. The rift is about 20 miles wide in most sections, but its geological impact is felt for hundreds of miles. Because the crust is so thin here, the area has a history of intense volcanic activity. You can see the evidence of this in the massive lava flows and cinder cones that dot the landscape near Albuquerque and Santa Fe. The Rio Grande River itself simply took advantage of the crack, flowing through the lowest points of the Rift Valley. It's a perfect example of how geology dictates where water and eventually humans will go. Living in the Rio Grande Rift means living on top of a geological pulling match. The rift is still active, though it moves very slowly. It has created a unique landscape of high-altitude deserts and jagged peaks that define the character of New Mexico. While it might look peaceful, the rift is a sign that the North American plate is under a lot of stress. It's a massive, beautiful fracture that has provided a corridor for travel and life for thousands of years, proving that even a broken part of the Earth can be a thriving ecosystem. 1. The Batoka Gorge, Zimbabwe/Zambia. Most people visit Victoria Falls to see the smoke that thunders, but the real geological star of the show is the Batoka Gorge. This is a series of 8 distinct zigzagging cracks in the Earth's basalt crust that were carved by the Zambezi River. As the river eroded its way through the soft cracks in the volcanic rock, it created a massive, narrow canyon that drops nearly 400 feet straight down. The width here is relatively narrow compared to the Grand Canyon, but the sheer verticality and the zigzag pattern make it one of the most unique cracks on Earth. The gorge is about 75 miles long and was formed over the last 100,000 years. What's wild about this crack is that it's actually a map of the river's history. Each zig and zag represents a previous location of Victoria Falls. As the river found a new crack in the rock, the waterfall would move upstream, leaving the old gorge behind. It's like watching a geological zipper slowly undo itself across the landscape of Africa. The width of the gorge is just enough to create some of the most intense whitewater rapids on the planet, attracting adventurers from all over the world. Standing on the Victoria Falls Bridge, you can look straight down into the heart of this fracture. The dark basalt walls are slick with mist, and the sound of the river echoes through the narrow gap. It's a raw, powerful demonstration of how a single river can exploit tiny weaknesses in the Earth's crust to create a massive, world-famous landmark. The Batoka Gorge isn't just a hole in the ground. It's a record of a river's relentless journey to tear through the solid rock of the African plateau. Whether they are deep-sea voids or fertile valleys, these scars are the story of a world that refuses to stand still. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to see more of our interesting content. Thanks for supporting us.